Welcome to a new episode of the Sober Minded Podcast. This is kind of a special episode because it is the return episode from a pretty long hiatus. I did take a couple months off from the podcast. I just got tired of doing it, and I just wanted to figure out a different way of doing it or a different way of delivering this kind of information. And I think this time I'll be more consistent coming out with episodes of the podcast. I'm also working on like regular videos to put out. I think I mentioned that a long time ago, but still working on that. I do have a video that's almost ready to come out. I just need to record the audio and the different images and stuff like that to put in the video. So, got some stuff coming out, but in this episode, kind of a special one, apart from the fact that it is the return episode to the Sober Minded Podcast. It's also kind of special because we'll be discussing something big that's coming up, which is, of course, the United States election, presidential election, 2024 election. That's kind of a big deal because it does determine the trajectory of this country for the next 4 years. So it is something that needs to be discussed. Also, the church's response, or the church, those people who call themselves Christians, will put it like that. Their response to the election. We'll be going over some of the statistics about Christians voting in this election, and also the projections for the election, the forecasting for the election, who's going to win, Trump or Harris. Briefly speaking about some dirt that people are trying to dig up about Trump and Epstein. So it should be a pretty interesting episode, and I hope you listen all the way through to hear all my thoughts on these different issues. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the 2024 election in general. Here I'm looking at a forecast from Polymarket. This is probably my favorite way to look at these kind of forecasts for the election. And you can see here Trump is in the lead, 59.5%, with Harris 40.6%. Trump is dropping by 2.9%. I'm not sure when that happened, but that is something that is being kept track of. And then we have the popular vote winner down here, Trump at 33% and Harris at 68%. But overall, the projection seems to be in Trump's favor, sitting around 60%. And I'm going to be honest, Trump is probably going to win. I think most likely that's the situation here. Trump is going to win the 2024 presidential election. But what's interesting about that is it seems kind of like an easy victory. The reason I'm saying that is because Kamala Harris is not really the candidate that should have been put forward for the Democratic Party. It was kind of like a bait and switch. It seemed like Biden was going to be their guy running for president again, but they kind of switched him out with Harris at the last second. Just a couple months ago, they did that. So it's kind of a bad move on the Democrats' part for doing that. It's not really the Democrats who are in control of their party. There's definitely people behind the scenes pulling the strings, controlling what's going on, controlling the things that we see. So certainly this is a plan from the deep state, shadow government, whatever you want to call it. There's different names you can give it, but it's, the group of bureaucrats that are controlling most things in the government and in this country. So I think that's definitely a plan from them. But the interesting thing is, they're not stupid people that are making these decisions. So why would they kind of shoot themselves in the foot by putting Harris as their candidate? Well, I think they want Trump to win. And that's kind of a concerning thing, because why would the shadow government, the deep state, why would they want Trump back in office? One theory that I have about this is perhaps Trump is compromised. And what I mean by that is maybe there's some sort of meeting that happened behind the scenes where Trump is not going to be as conservative once he gets into office. He's going to be a lot more liberal, and we have seen kind of hints of this, I guess, in terms of his stance on abortion, and really his stance on a lot of things. He's not as right-wing as he was in 2016, and so I think there is sort of an argument you can make that he is or has been compromised, if that's the case. If that's the case behind the scenes, they've had this meeting and they said, okay, we're going to put Harris up because we want Trump to win. And Trump's going to be the deep state guy instead of fighting against the deep state like he did in 2016. So that may or may not be the case. I don't put 100% of my belief into that. I don't think that's really what's going on. I think what's going on is the Democratic Party is in shambles, and they're kind of scrambling to do something that will get them ahead, that will get them a victory. But they kind of messed up. So I think that's I guess that's my official stance on this, but I do have my theoretical stance, or kind of my conspiracy theory idea about this. But I think my official stance is, they just made a mistake. They made a really big mistake with Biden, and they just made it even worse with putting Harris as their candidate, or whoever put Harris as their candidate. Again, it wasn't like the Democrats voted for Harris. She just kind of put herself in there, or someone put her there, which I think is most likely the case, that someone else is setting up these chess pieces like this for a certain outcome. They do want Trump to win. Another reason why the deep state could want Trump in office is so they can use that as a reason to increase the sort of civil unrest and racial tension and all the things that are bubbling under the surface already. Having Trump in office will give them more opportunities to do that, rather than having someone like Harris in office. Because, to be honest, conservatives, Republicans are not very bloodthirsty as they are portrayed in the media. They did have, the quote-unquote insurrection. Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about that, but that was a thing that conservatives supposedly started. But there is evidence that that wasn't the case. But nobody wants to look into that evidence any further. But besides that, Republicans and conservatives aren't very bloodthirsty as the media portrays them, whereas Democrats are totally lunatics and bloodthirsty, violent party. They have a history of all sorts of evil, bad things in this country, doing evil and bad things in this country. So I think it's pretty obvious that when there's a president who's of the opposite party, the Democrats have a lot more freedom to do bad things, even though they do bad things already. So, for example, the BLM riots, and with all the things going on social media, the censorship, and even on top of that, just the bullying tactics that Democrats have, even on the lower levels of society. So, for example, just the common person who votes Democrat acts a lot different than the common person who votes Republican. So there's definitely going to be more room for Democrats to be more violent and oppositional if Trump is president. So I believe that's one reason that they want Trump to win, or one reason that they're letting Trump to win. But again, this is all theoretical. I'm just theorizing, sharing my opinions and my thoughts on this matter of the election. But I do think Trump is going to win. That's my official stance. And this will be my third time voting for Donald J. Trump. I voted for him in 2016, voted for him in 2020, and once again, for a third time, voting for him in 2024. This might sound kind of weird. A lot of people do sort of make fun of conservatives for treating Trump like a cult leader, and they insult conservatives and Republicans by saying that they are cultists, Trump cultists, MAGA cultists, whatever thing they want to call them. I've grown more attached to Trump since 2016. It's kind of like, when you're watching a show or watching a movie and you get really invested with a certain character, and you want to see that character, get some sort of victory at the end of the show or at the end of the movie. And I feel like in a kind of way, that's kind of what I feel like with Trump. It's been since 2016, and all the things leading up to this 2016 presidential election, all the memes, all the speeches, all the little sound bites, all the quotes that Trump had leading up to the first election that he was in. And then even after that, in the 2020 election, same kind of thing. You just get more attached to this person, to this candidate. And he's sort of become this figure that represents a lot more than just a presidential candidate or just a run-of-the-mill politician or run-of-the-mill billionaire. He's become more than what he appears to be, I guess. It sounds kind of weird, but that's my feeling. It's my opinion on that situation. So, and that's one thing that the Democrats don't have. They sort of try it here and there. They tried it with Hillary, didn't work. Tried it with Biden, that also didn't work. And again with Harris, and it just doesn't work with these sorts of people. They don't have the kind of character and personality. They don't have the kind of drive and they don't have that kind of ethos that Trump has, and the kind of relationship that Trump has with his voters and with his supporters. So Democrats, they might try it again with a different candidate in the next election, but as far as this election is concerned, they failed. But also, we have to mention the fraud plan. It's going to be something that the Democrats try again, stealing the election. This is probably something that I'm not supposed to talk about once again, but we do have to talk about it because there certainly was fraud. 100% objectively, there was fraud in the 2020 election. The official legal answer you'll hear from people or from the government institutions is that there was insufficient evidence for widespread fraud, something along those lines. Now, they're not denying that there was fraud. They deny that it was widespread fraud. And so that's the difference here. That's kind of how they play games with the words to, try to make you think that there wasn't any fraud at all. But they can't deny that there was cases of fraud because there certainly was. That's an objective fact. There was some shady things going on with the election and the voting process in 2020. So this simply cannot deny that. So if they try it again, they can just do the same thing and just sort of hand wave it away and just say, nope, insufficient evidence for widespread fraud, election fraud. So you can't really say that they stole the election, even though they're definitely going to try again. And perhaps they did in 2020. I'm not saying it's 100% fact that they did, but 100% we know that they did fraud. There was election fraud. So it's certainly something they're going to try again if they don't want Trump to win. But again, I feel like they do want Trump to win. So I think they'll let him win. I don't think they're going to have any fraud. But in case that Harris does win, 100% it's going to be because of fraud, because of rigging the election, which is kind of a terrifying thing to think about because they're not going to stop there. Certainly they don't just stop at fraud in the election. They take it further and they have fraud in other things just to hurt the common people. I guess I'll put it like that. I don't want to go too much into that. It's definitely a lengthy discussion about all the different ways that the Democratic Party, or if you don't like me using that kind of divisive language, Democrats versus Republicans, the bureaucrats in the government, there's definitely a lot of ways that a lot of tactics that they use to push the common man down. They sort of rig the game against good and honest people, good and honest citizens. And that's, like I said, lengthy conversation about that, lengthy discussion about that. But right now we're discussing the election now. And I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about the election. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments. Reach out to me. Let me know what you think about what I just said. If you disagree or agree, give me a reason why. And let me know who you think's going to win and why. But for now, we got to move on to the next topic, which is very closely related, and it is the statistics, the demographics of Christians voting or people of religious faith voting and the percentages. This is an article from the Jerusalem Post, but you can find this information from other people. I don't particularly know anything about this news site, the Jerusalem Post, but they do have the stats from a pretty famous research institution. And so I'm just looking at this article because of the stats that they include. The study suggests that approximately 104 million people of faith, including 32 million self-identified Christians who regularly attend church, may abstain from voting this November. The report cited by the New American and Catholic Vote finds that only 51% of people of faith, a group encompassing Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Mormons, and other religious traditions, are planning to vote. Only 51% of people of faith. This signals a potential large drop in voting participation from a demographic that has historically played a critical role in elections. The researchers define people of faith as individuals who describe themselves as having religious beliefs or associate with a recognized religious tradition such as Christianity, Judaism, Mormonism, Islam, and others. According to this definition, 79% of Americans qualify as people of faith. Of course, on the Christian side of things now, 79% of Americans qualify as people of faith. Okay, that's a very vague and broad way of describing Christians or people of faith. We're going to use that term, people of these different religions. But when specifically talking about Christianity, or I guess this would also apply to any people of these religious traditions, are they actually what they say they are? So, for example, if someone says they're Mormon or a Muslim, but they don't follow their beliefs accurately. So this is the problem with these kind of statistics, but it does give us a general idea of the voting habits of religious people. And then certainly for the Christians, people who identify as Christians, we know there's a lot of liberal people that identify as Christians, and maybe more so now than ever. So that is something to consider when looking at these statistics. But the article continues. Dr. George Barna, speaking with Catholic Vote, emphasized the importance of this trend. One of the most important findings of the research is the depressed voting intent of people of faith. He highlighted that 32 million Christians who regularly attend church services but are unlikely to vote represent a much larger margin than the votes that decided the 2020 election in key battleground states. So this is very, very frustrating, of course, coming from a Christian. It's very frustrating with other Christians who are not voting or who have refused to vote. 32 million Christians who regularly attend church services are unlikely to vote. And there's more of them this year than there was in the 2020 election. So that is very concerning. It's very annoying as well. Like, because I know these kinds of people, and they can be Christians or non-Christians or of a different religion, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But they kind of, these people who think, well, both candidates are evil, so I'm just not going to vote. It's really stupid and selfish. I mean, at least vote for the candidate you think is going to be better for the country. Stop thinking about yourself. Like, get over yourself and vote for someone. Then also for Christians, it's like, it should be so obvious who aligns more with Christian values and Christian ethics, which in this case would be, hands down, no argument, Donald Trump aligns more with Christian values. He's not perfect. He's not even a good Christian, I would say, but he's certainly the one who favors Christianity more and values Christian ethics more so than Harris by far. There's not even an argument there. So, I mean, if you're a Christian who's struggling on knowing who to vote for, just vote for Trump. That's the easiest answer. Just vote for Trump. We need Trump as president. That's all Christians should be coming to that conclusion without any problem. But again, this is my opinion. If that upsets you, let me know. Later on, the article says, according to the report, 83% of adults who identify as religious are Christians, but it is estimated that 46 million church-attending Protestants and 19 million church-attending Catholics will not participate in the election. This represents a substantial portion of the faith community that could shift the election's outcome if mobilized. And once again, that is a large portion that could shift the election. 46 million and 19 million. Just vote for Trump. If it really bothers you voting for Trump, just close your eyes and vote for Trump. And the reasons for them not engaging in voting, the article continues. The study further revealed that the most common reasons cited by voters for abstaining from voting include a lack of interest in politics. A lack of interest in politics. Christians, out of all people, should be the most involved, the most interested in politics. The Bible does talk a lot about politics. The New Testament, there's a lot about politics, toward how to behave towards the government officials and the respect owed to them. Second reason, disliking all major candidates. So again, I've already kind of spoke to that. People who say they don't like either candidates, so they're just not going to vote. It's kind of like that one quote that goes around. I think it's from Spurgeon, and he says, when faced with the choice of choosing the lesser of two evils, choose neither. Some people apply that to the election, which is a very bad argument against voting. You got to make a choice. You got to vote because you got to stand on your morals. You got to stand on your ethics, and you have to take this country that you live in seriously. You got to take this process seriously. And if you're just not going to play the game, quote unquote, it's not really a game. If you choose not to play because you don't like the candidates, you're being very childish, being very selfish. Now, if you don't think your vote matters, that's one thing. If you say, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't matter, and then you have there's a pretty strong argument that you can make to say that your vote doesn't matter, especially if you're a Republican. If you vote Republican, there's more higher chance that your vote will be tampered with. So I guess that's one case. I would sympathize more with somebody who has that kind of line of thinking rather than somebody who just says, I don't like either candidate, so I'm not going to vote. That's very annoying, very irritating. But nonetheless, the article continues, and believing that their vote will not make a difference, so I just kind of addressed that. Half of the respondents pointed to the controversial nature of the election as their reason for staying away from the polls, while nearly 48% expressed concerns over potential election rigging, there we go, or a lack of sufficient information about the candidates to make an informed decision, according to the New America. Not enough information to make a decision. It's been how long that we've known Trump and his policies and his stances? Of course, he has changed and shifted on a couple of different things. But, I mean, you know Trump, you know what he stands for, you know what he represents, you know what he wants, you know what he's going to do when he gets into office. So at this point, it's not an excuse that you didn't know enough about the candidates. Of course, I guess you could make that claim for Harris, who has not been really in the public eye. She just doesn't have as much time being in the public in that sense comparatively to Trump. But she's been in politics, she's been in the government for a while. So again, that argument is kind of stupid. And then further on, the article states, according to Catholic Vote, only 56% of churches have actively encouraged voting. Fewer still have taken more concrete steps, such as registering voters or distributing voter guides. This lack of engagement has led to frustration among regular churchgoers, particularly with Protestant and Catholic communities. I do kind of agree with that. I think churches should be pushing their members to vote. Personally, if I had a church, I would do that. Or if I was leading a church, I would certainly do things like that, because it is very important to mobilize Christians to make decisions that influence the country, because the country does not have as much Christian influence as we would like to believe. It was founded on Christian principles. They say Judeo-Christian principles, but it is Christian principles nonetheless, biblical principles and ethics. The country was built on that, and the influence has been losing and leaving the country as time has progressed. So the only way there's going to be a Christian influence on the government is if Christians vote. So if Christians make their opinions and their voices heard instead of being afraid of or lack of interest in politics or the other various reasons that the Christian population is not voting. It would be a good thing to encourage Christians to vote. So really, that's all there is to say about this side of the election. As far as it concerns Christians, Christians should vote. Who should they vote for? I think it's a no-brainer. Vote for Trump. And it's not just, like we want the nation to be, well, I guess it would be different depending on what your eschatology is. For example, to those who are post-mill, would want to see the government influenced in every aspect, to have a Christian influence all throughout the different ranks of the government. That is a noble thing. I think it's a good thing to want and to pray for. But whether it's going to happen or whether it's in God's plan is a different issue. I don't think that's in the cards for this life. We're not going to have a perfectly Christian government this side of heaven. We're also not going to have the church rule the world this side of heaven. When the church rules the world, that's when Christ has come down and brought his kingdom on earth physically. He created the new heavens and the new earth and rules alongside the church. So this kind of this post-mill idea that the church is going to rule over the world, or that the church should have a massive influence over the government, I just think it's kind of a unlikely outcome. I think if you believe that, honestly, I think you got your head in the clouds. I respect, of course, different post-mill theologians. They've written good things about eschatology and other subjects as well. A lot of smart people are post-mill, but when it comes down to it, I think they kind of got their head in the clouds. And furthermore, I don't think you don't need a Christian nation to have a good nation. You do need the country built on certain biblical principles and certain Christian ethics in order to have a thriving society and in order to have a morally good society, which is why we've seen so many things crumbling in societies, because these Christian ethics are not being reinforced in the world or in this country. And so we see the detrimental effects of that on the different aspects of society. That's why things are headed towards where they are, because these Christian ethics are not being enforced. So I think that is necessary to have a good country, but I don't think it's necessary to have all the people in government be Christian in order for that to happen. So I think that's all there is to say about that. The last thing I'll end on is, I have seen on Twitter, this has been trending on Twitter, these things about Epstein and Trump. So they're trying to dig this up again about Trump flew on Epstein's plane. And you can look at the flight logs. You can look at how many times each person has been on Epstein's plane. Trump was only on his plane 8 times. And someone like Bill Clinton was on there like almost 20 times. So and Trump is not perfect. He might have done some bad things. He probably did do bad things. Being a rich person in the 80s and 90s, I think you're certainly more inclined to do some pretty bad things, as all millionaires are inclined to do, because they think they can get away with anything and they have so much money and so much power. So of course, people who are rich probably do some bad things, probably things that are more bad than somebody who's a lot poorer, because they just have access to a lot more things. So I'm not saying Trump is this squeaky clean guy. He's not perfect. He's not someone to emulate, even. I would go so far as to say that. But and some people say, well, this is whataboutism, right? When you bring up people like Bill Clinton, you bring up people like Bill Gates, other people who have been on the Epstein plane and who have been to the island. I don't think, as far as my research that I've done, I think Trump has been to the island once or twice. Most of the time when people would fly on Epstein's plane, it would be from one airport to the next, from Florida to New York. So those are flights contained within the U.S. And then I don't think Trump ever went to another country with Epstein. That's when the shady stuff really started happening. There's a lot of cases of the shady stuff happening within the U.S. And that mostly involved Epstein and a couple of other people that were sort of the usual suspects that were a part of that. But the people who flew with Epstein to other countries, that's, even more shady, and some probably really bad stuff was going on over there as well. And Bill Clinton was a part of a lot of those flights to other countries and to the island as well. Bill Gates also, and it's not that far-fetched to say rich people hanging out with rich people is a pretty common thing. So Trump hanging out with Epstein is really not really that surprising. But what's surprising is, of course, this double standard that the Democrats always have against Trump, instead of going against people on their own side of politics, such as Bill Clinton. So if Trump is so bad for flying on Epstein's plane 8 times, why isn't Bill Clinton even more of a bad guy for being on his plane almost 20 times? So there's double standards going on. So there's certainly double standards going on there. And nobody wants to recognize that, because they just want to throw Trump under the bus because they don't want him to be president. And why don't they want him to be president? Well, because the media portrays him in a certain way that he isn't. And so they get this false idea. And it's also this us and them, us versus them mentality. If you're a Democrat, you don't want to be caught blaming your own people, and you don't want to be caught saying good things about the people on the opposite side. Most Democrats operate like that, and most Republicans operate like that as well. So no Democrat wants to be caught dead saying, well, Trump did this, but we have Democrats who have done worse. No Democrat's going to be caught dead saying those kinds of things about their own people on their party. And of course, there was other people, the other usual suspects, who were also hanging out with Epstein had a stronger relationship, stronger connection with him. And those people are more culpable. They're more guilty than Trump is, I would say. There's less evidence. And speaking of evidence, there's a lot of people who have come out and said, Trump did certain things with certain people in the past, or I guess even you can even include the recent case, or within a certain number of years. There was a recent case where he was supposedly caught, doing something, and all those cases, this is only what we're allowed to see of a certain political candidate. This is only what we're being allowed to see of Trump. Imagine the things that we're not able to see of other political candidates. It's much worse, probably. That's why they don't want it out there. But the reason they want it out there for Trump is because he's their enemy. That's why they allow these things and they push these things to be out there. And all the rich donors to the media, they push these stories and they keep it in the news cycle for longer, rather than keeping a story like him almost getting his head blown off. That's pushed out of the news cycle much more quickly than this stuff about, who and whatever allegations are being thrown at him, which may or may not be true. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe those things are true. All the allegations are true, right? Once again, this is what we're only allowed to see from Trump. But imagine things we're not allowed to see from those who are protected by the media and the establishment, from the bureaucrats and from the other billionaires, and even from the globalists. I mean, you look at the connections between all the different bureaucrats and the globalists. There's a lot of connections there. They're taking care of each other in that sense, and they're protecting each other from being ratted out for their heinous crimes and actions. So just think about that. If you're a Christian who doesn't like Trump, you don't like him because you're being allowed to look at the things that will make you hate him, right? But you need to understand that everybody in politics has a lot of dirt on them. Okay, there's a lot of blackmail going on in politics. So of course, people have dirt on each other. But you got to think about what you're being allowed to see and what you're not being allowed to see. This is something where Alex Jones is really good at. He's really good at bringing out some details that aren't allowed they're not allowed to the general public, right? Because people are being protected. They're having their images protected, right? And it's not like I did one bad thing 10 years ago or 20 years ago and they're bringing it back up. This is stuff that they're actively doing. There's bad things that these people are doing, these bureaucrats, these globalists. They're doing these bad things currently as we speak. And it's being hidden from us, but we're only allowed to see the bad things about the people that are actually doing good. So, not saying Trump is a morally good person, but he's doing things that are good, and he aspires for good things for this country. So, let that think about that for a little bit, and go vote for Trump. If you're undecided, if you're a Christian, just vote for Trump, man. It's just the easiest thing you can do. It's not that hard to vote. Just vote for Trump. That's pretty much everything that I had on my mind, and hopefully you'll be hearing a lot from me. If you get tired of my voice, too bad. You're going to be hearing it a lot more. I'll be coming out with more podcasts, more regular videos. Like I said, I'm pretty much done with the script for that video that I've been working on for a long time. It's called The Religion of Atheists and Skeptics. So that will be out pretty soon, hopefully within this month of November. We just started November, so hopefully it'll be out this week, next week. And yeah, I'm excited for what's to come after the election and for next year. It's going to be an interesting time in the US. Regardless, I will see you in the next episode.